Sorry for the bother. The thing is, he began. The moment I learned the truth, I was filled with surprise, gratitude toward my father-in-law, and a sense of liberation. My name is Charlotte. Born in April, surrounded by the gentle scent of blossoming flowers, as my name suggests. Since then, 45 years have passed. I've devoted my life to my family as a wife and a mother, cherishing each day. But problems arose outside of my family life. I used to spend joyful times with my family alone. I met my husband Joseph at a club in college. We hit it off, started dating, and eventually got married. We have a son, but he's working in the city as a professional, so he only returns home once every 6 months. Ever since it became just the two of us, Joseph and I looked forward to revisiting places we went when we first dated. How about going to Six Flags tomorrow on our day off? Now here's the question. What did Charlotte do 23 years ago at that amusement park? Did I do something? Caught off guard by Joseph's sudden question, my mind raced to remember. Something from that long ago? Oh, I remember. After riding the teacups, I got dizzy and fell into a nearby pond. That's correct. I was so embarrassed I wanted to pretend I didn't know you. How mean! Why did you let go of my hand then? Laughing about my embarrassing moments like this has become a treasured pastime. Even when it's just the two of us at home, the atmosphere never darkens. We lived a happy life. Due to Joseph's shift work, there were days we hardly saw each other. But since I adjusted my work to match his schedule, I rarely felt lonely. However, then a major event that would drastically affect our lives happened. Our father-in-law was diagnosed with terminal pancreatic cancer. Surgery was difficult, and the 5-year survival rate was less than 2%. A dire illness. Both Joseph and I were filled with such hatred, our hands clenched into fists. When a loved one suddenly falls ill, you wonder what you can do. What's the best course of action? And your mind goes blank. Joseph has a sister living in the neighboring town, but she doesn't know about this yet. Deciding to inform her soon, Joseph picked up his smartphone and made a call. After 7 rings, a loud, shrill voice echoed through the receiver. Why are you calling now of all times? I'm busy preparing dinner. We have something important to talk about. We'll come over tomorrow evening. Despite her complaints about the sudden development, this wasn't the time to worry about such things. After conveying the necessary information, Joseph hung up. Joseph normally didn't pay much mind to his free-spirited sister-in-law, who rarely shows up at family gatherings and doesn't quite mesh well with his personality. But this time, things were different. The next day, we hastily took the day off and headed to her house. When we rang the doorbell, her husband, not the friendliest of individuals, was the first to answer. He opened the door without changing his expression and looked at us with an intimidating stare. Not a pleasant feeling. In the living room, she cast a cold glance at us. Despite not having seen each other for 6 months, she treated us worse than strangers. Amidst this, Joseph fixed his intense gaze on her. Then, as he informed her about their father's illness, she uttered unbelievable words from her mouth. So what? You came all the way here to say that? The sickness is Dad's fault. Don't tell me you came here expecting me to take care of him. Instead of expressing sadness about her father's illness, she seemed more concerned about avoiding any inconvenience to herself. It was my first time seeing a daughter look down on her father, who didn't choose to get sick, and I felt embarrassed for her as a fellow human being. My anger peaked, and even my parents, who had planned to talk calmly, were getting worn down. That's too much. You're his daughter, aren't you? Even though a loved one is suffering, you can be so indifferent? If the roles were reversed, you would definitely be upset. I thought she would reflect a bit on what I said and quiet down, but I underestimated her. Don't talk nonsense! There's no rule that says I have to look after him because I'm his daughter. If you're so concerned about it, why don't you do it? Joseph is his child, just like I am. Indeed, my husband Joseph is also father-in-law's child, and it's not right to put the responsibility on sister-in-law alone. Because she's so irresponsible, I thought she should step up and take care of father-in-law at a time like this. But people like her are good at justifying their behavior. What she said wasn't wrong, and I figured it was futile to argue any further, so I dropped it. Although we were reluctant to leave father-in-law to sister-in-law, who clearly didn't want to deal with this, We, as a working couple, didn't have the time, unlike sister-in-law, who was a housewife. If Joseph had to quit his job, it would be better for our finances if I quit mine, but I found fulfillment in my current job. As I was considering my options, sister-in-law revealed her trump card with a triumphant look on her face. By the way, Charlotte, you have a nursing certification, don't you? You know more than an amateur like me. I think you should be the one to take care of him. It's reassuring for the patient to have a professional take care of them, isn't it? I had worked as a CNA in a nursing home 15 years ago, having earned a nursing certification so that I could take care of my parents if something happened, since I'm an only child. Knowing it would be futile to pursue sister-in-law any further, we decided to go home and think things over. I'm sorry you have such an unfeeling and troublesome sister-in-law. She's not the type to reflect on herself, even if I said something, so I couldn't say anything. No, it's okay. I knew that no matter what you said, it wouldn't change anything. It's not your fault, Joseph. What should we do? I can tell you love your job, and I would feel bad taking that away from you just because my dad got sick. But even in a situation like this, it made me happy to see Joseph thinking so much about me. But unlike sister-in-law, I'm not heartless. I wanted to cherish every minute of father-in-law's life. It's okay, don't worry about me. I can figure out my job situation later. The most important thing is I met you, thanks to your dad, so I want to express my gratitude. Holding Joseph's hand, I saw his eyes welling up with regret. Let's face this together. Seeing Joseph's expression lighten a bit, I geared up to tackle the bigger problem. The biggest issue here is money, isn't it? While chatting with Joseph, it turned out that my father-in-law had only signed up for the cheapest insurance available. That meant the guaranteed expenses would be minimal, and we'd have to pay out of pocket for necessities. Well, his daughters definitely won't offer to chip in, he said. And they should be contributing more if they're not going to help take care of him. Their lack of dependability was disheartening, even though I hadn't expected much to begin with. Caring for a sick person requires mustering up your own motivation when it's at rock bottom. It's not an easy task. It was a battle against myself. The next day, I decided to step away from my work in the bar kitchen, where I'd enjoyed the camaraderie and hard work alongside the younger staff. When I explained the situation, everyone was understanding, though their disappointment at my leaving was palpable. "Please come back when you can," they said. Those words gave me strength and became my motivation for what lay ahead. With that, I headed straight to the hospital where father-in-law was waiting. Arriving at the hospital, I saw father-in-law from behind, quietly facing away from the entrance. I couldn't tell if he was staring out the window or sleeping, but his loneliness and sadness were palpable, and I couldn't find the words to speak just yet. After about 30 seconds, I took a deep breath and walked closer to father-in-law. As I tried to figure out what to say and how to say it, father-in-law spoke first. "Charlotte, thank you for coming. I'm sorry to be such a burden." His face softened as he greeted me, but quickly his eyes filled with worry, and his expression darkened. He was so considerate, despite his illness, and it angered me that his own daughter, sister-in-law, couldn't bother to be here. "Please, let me know if there's anything I can do for you." I knew I couldn't understand the pain of his illness, but I wanted to support him as best as I could. Once I'd finished my morning chores, I'd take a 40-minute journey to the hospital each day. I'd always driven to work, but now I opted for the bus to maximize my time with father-in-law, even if it meant cutting into my sleep. The bus rides were soothing, providing a brief respite and rejuvenation for the challenging days ahead. As I watched father-in-law's vitality diminish day by day, I devoted my heart and energy to making him comfortable. The medical procedures, including IVs and medication, were necessary, but not simple. Unlike a routine IV for a cold, a catheter had to be placed near his heart via a surgical incision below his collarbone. The sight was distressing, but it was the best we could do for father-in-law, who wasn't a candidate for surgery. "Try this," I offered, handing him a Walkman. Father-in-law loved karaoke and had even won local competitions with his amazing voice. He used to practice daily by singing along to his CD player, but his hospitalization had put an end to that. Wanting him to keep his passion for music alive, I loaded his favorite songs onto the Walkman as a gift. He immediately put on the headphones and pressed play. His face instantly brightened. I thought I wouldn't be able to listen to music anymore. Thank you so much. Now I have to win another karaoke competition when I get discharged." Seeing father-in-law smile, I felt a bit relieved. Even amidst the unfamiliar hospital atmosphere and daily tough treatments, father-in-law never complained. In fact, he was more worried about me. "Sorry for causing you trouble and expenses. I wish we had traveled more with you and Joseph. I've always wanted to go to that place." Then he took out his mobile phone and showed me a picture. There, countless lavender flowers were blooming in all directions. Wow, that's beautiful. This place used to be nothing but fields, but after urban development, it turned into such a beautiful spot. This flower is my favorite. Seeing father-in-law's eyes sparkling, I wanted him to get better even more urgently. From then on, I decided to stop by a florist before going to the hospital for father-in-law, who loved flowers. After you left, I felt lonely, but having flowers around changes things. I found myself talking to the flowers, and the nurses looked at me like I was strange. We had a good laugh over this. 2 weeks later, a feeding tube was attached to father-in-law, who had been eating normally until then. You could visibly see his body turning more yellow. His voice, calling my name, lost its energy. I had to suppress my fear and act strong, which was tough. I hadn't expected him to become bedridden in just 2 weeks after the cancer diagnosis. I was painfully aware of the dreadfulness of the disease. I wanted to say, "Stay strong, Dad," but I knew he would be the most frustrated. He probably didn't want to admit that he was weak, and would be blaming his body for not listening to him. His smile, showing strength at times, was a saving grace for me. I would often excuse myself to the restroom, unable to hold back my tears. I'd wash my face with cold water to cool my flushed face, and then return to his room. Joseph also spent some quality father-son time with him, during his breaks or on his days off. I would enjoy some quiet time alone at a cafe in the hospital during those moments. Father-in-law, who was always kind to me, seemed even happier when talking with his son. So I decided to give them as much time together as possible. An hour later, when I returned to the room, the two were discussing insurance money. "I want my modest insurance money to go to Charlotte, who's taking great care of me," father-in-law said, turning towards me. He had changed the beneficiary to ensure that I would get the money in case something happened to him. That's when the hospital room door flung open with a bang, and sister-in-law stormed in, hurling abuse. "I heard your conversation! Why did you change the beneficiary to her? It used to be me! Change it back, immediately, or I'll spread the word that you're the worst father ever!" Both Joseph and I couldn't believe the childish words she was saying. However, to our surprise, father-in-law defended sister-in-law. "All right, I got it. If you feel so strongly about it, I'll change the beneficiary back to you. But in return, promise me you'll stop saying hurtful things to Charlotte. She's the wife of my beloved son, Joseph. I won't tolerate her getting hurt, no matter what happens." Perhaps sister-in-law really loved money, to the point of obsessing over it. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that's all she thought about. Once the father-in-law said that, the sister-in-law nodded quietly and left the hospital room. I wanted to follow her out of disbelief, but was stopped by my husband and the father-in-law. So I reluctantly sat down on a chair in the room. However, I couldn't help but notice something off about their behaviors, leaving me with a big question mark floating in my mind. "Hey, why are you guys laughing?" In response to my question, my father-in-law began to explain the truth between chuckles. "That silly girl really believed all my assets were tied up in insurance and went home. Your plan worked well, Dad." Then my father-in-law took out 3 bank cards from a locked drawer and handed them to me. He told me they held a fortune beyond my wildest imagination, which left me speechless with surprise. I knew the father-in-law was wealthy, but a new question popped up in my mind. Why was he only enrolled in a single minimal insurance plan? However, it was a decent plan that would give him $10 million in the event of his death. "All my assets are on these cards. I know I don't have much time left, so I want you two to use it. I'm sorry for all the expenses I put you through, with my hospital bills, flowers, and clothes." No, the money we spent isn't a big deal at all," We can't accept such a huge sum, it would feel like a punishment. Just take it as a token of gratitude for taking care of me. And remember, keep this a secret from her. It seemed that just like us, the father-in-law didn't think highly of the sister-in-law due to her selfish behavior and lack of family consideration. That's why we had decided to leave her only the bare minimum if anything happened to him. Won't you accept my offer? Faced with their earnest gazes, I found it hard to refuse. I felt guilty, but agreed, nonetheless. 2 weeks later, in accordance with the father-in-law's wish to spend his remaining time in a more home-like environment, receiving palliative care, we moved him to a hospice. We contacted the sister-in-law just in case, but her only response was a curt, "Good for you." It was truly an eye-rolling moment. Despite the sister-in-law's absence, the warm conversation between the three of us continued. "I'm sorry for causing you trouble with my secret, but there's one more thing. Did you know my father was Martino Aaron?" "What? You mean the famous singer? I've seen him on the hit nostalgia song show." "Are you serious? That's news to me." This was big news. Even Joseph didn't know. Apparently, it was not public knowledge that the father-in-law was Martino Aaron's son. He was a secret child, and because Martino Aaron was a public figure, it was kept under wraps. However, Martino Aaron apparently doted on the father-in-law behind the scenes and shared his wealth with him before he passed away. "When I'm gone, go here." Saying that, the father-in-law handed us a piece of paper. It only had an address written on it, and we had no idea what it was about. He kept evading our questions for more details. A month later, after living his final days at the hospice, the father-in-law peacefully passed away. "Father-in-law," I sobbed, calling for him one more time, but there was no answer. Gratitude welled up in me for how he had always treated me like his own daughter, and tears streamed down my face like a waterfall. As we stood by father-in-law's side, leaning on Joseph for support, we watched the doctor and nurses do their work. At the funeral, sister-in-law arrived and began crying loudly. A stark contrast to the attitude she had shown us previously. She was talking to the attendees as though she cared deeply for her father. I wanted to tell everyone that all sister-in-law wanted was money, but doing so wouldn't make father-in-law happy. So I decided to think of sister-in-law as a stranger, which somewhat eased my mind. Of course, after the funeral, sister-in-law didn't interfere with us, and we didn't bother with her either. A week after father-in-law's passing, Joseph and I headed to the location written on the piece of paper father-in-law had given us. The sight that met us was astonishing. "What is this?" Both Joseph's and my voices overlapped. Before us stood an enormous, opulent mansion like nothing we'd ever seen before. Unsure of how to proceed, we decided to walk around the vast gardens first. A woman emerged from the house, and I was so surprised I fell backwards. I'm sorry, I didn't think anyone was here." The woman in front of us wore a kind smile as she invited us into the house. The interior was so extravagant, with marble, diamonds, and ornate decorations. It felt like we had stepped into a dream. The woman guided us to a room with plush chairs where we sat down. As I hurried to understand the reality of the situation, the woman began to speak slowly. "I've been the caretaker of this house. Your father owned this place and used it to entertain his friends from time to time. Every time someone would visit, I would come to assist. However, there's no longer a need for me to come here. Your father's final wish was to hand over the ownership of this house to you, Joseph and Charlotte." After saying this, she handed us a set of keys, a map of the house, and a notebook detailing the location of various valuables. She added, "I'm glad to have met the people your father treasured the most. I wish you happiness." After these words, she left. 2 hours of investigating later, we found a letter from father-in-law in a desk drawer in the study. The letter stated that we could live in or sell the house as we wished. There was no way for us to express our gratitude to father-in-law, who left us not only a fortune, but also this grand mansion, as he was no longer with us. All we could do was continue living in this world, for father-in-law's sake. The following month, we decided to go to a hotel father-in-law had wanted to visit for 15 years. On our way, we played father-in-law's favorite music and spoke to a photo of him. Father-in-law, we're finally going on a trip together. Let's have a blast today, I said. Suddenly, a leaf fell and stuck to our car window, shaking lightly. It felt like father-in-law had answered us, which made me happy. 3 hours later, we arrived at the historic hotel father-in-law had spoken of, nestled in a quiet spot surrounded by peaceful nature. Photos of several past presidents adorned the walls of the hotel, signifying its recognition and importance. After we were shown to our spacious room, we sat down on the sofa, savoring the welcome drinks and fresh fruits. It's been a while since we've been able to enjoy a leisurely trip like this. Yeah, well, Dad's with us today. It had been a long time since Joseph and I had shared a look, and I couldn't help but feel a bit embarrassed. After enjoying the spa and exploring the hotel, it was finally time for the meal we were looking forward to. Since we had ordered meals for 3, the room service staff who brought it to our room was quite surprised. When we explained the situation, they nodded in understanding, with a kind smile. After talking about my father-in-law for a while, they even offered us a bottle of wine on the house. This is delicious! Just what Dad would say, I mused. Being an infrequent drinker, I got tipsy that day, until my memory blurred. However, my husband Joseph, who was good with alcohol, remembered my actions and told me about them the next morning. Last night, you kept stroking Dad's picture and saying, "I love you." I can count on one hand the number of times you've said that to me. I was a bit envious of Dad, he said, laughing. We shared this humorous anecdote as we drove along a different route than the day before. Oh, here! There, lavender was blooming as far as the eye could see. There was no mistake. This was the place my father-in-law had shown us in the photo. Embraced by the gentleness of the lavender color, I felt invigorated, not just entrapped in sadness, but eager to face forward. Dad told me once that Mom used to gaze at the lavender a lot before she passed away. Realizing that my father-in-law had brought us here out of love for his wife touched my heart deeply. Since then, we've started bringing lavender to the grave. The lavender has become a precious flower for our family, warming our hearts and bodies. Once we returned to our normal lives, we started spending our weekends in the luxurious house my father-in-law left us. Thanks to this, every week felt like a vacation. My love for Joseph deepened, and my gratitude to my father-in-law overflowed. I can't count how many times I wet my clothes with tears of joy. Fast forward a month later. It was a weekday around 7 p.m. After Joseph came home and took a bath, I was preparing dinner when the doorbell rang. When I checked the monitor, I saw my sister-in-law. She rarely comes to our house. I wanted to pretend we weren't home, but with Joseph's car in the driveway and the lights on, that wasn't possible. As I was hesitating, the impatient sister-in-law began to pound on the door. Worried about the neighbor's eyes, I turned off the stove and hurried to the door. As soon as I opened the door, my sister-in-law started yelling before the door fully closed. "Where the hell are you two on the weekends?" It seems she came to our house over the weekend, but Joseph and I were not there. I couldn't tell her why, so I remained silent, while she glared at me threateningly. All right, come this way." I didn't want her lingering at the front door, so I led her to the living room, intending to let Joseph handle her. Just then, Joseph, fresh from his bath, came to the entrance, and I sighed in relief. "Sis, what brings you here around dinner time?" I appreciated Joseph's forthright approach as I watched the two of them. He led her to the living room, and the conversation continued. "I came to light incense for Dad at the family altar over the weekend, but you two were nowhere to be found." Her self-righteous tone still irked me. Then, out of the blue, Joseph dropped a bombshell. "I actually spend my weekends dating Charlotte, trying to pass on all the love that Dad gave me. Sorry if this doesn't sit well with you. A sister who has to deal with her husband being lovey-dovey with another woman." My voice and sister-in-law's overlapped in shock. What? Sister-in-law was visibly shaken by this unexpected revelation. There's no way! What are you talking about? There's no way he could be interested in any other woman but me! Immediately after, Joseph took out his mobile phone from his pocket and showed a picture to sister-in-law. Curiosity piqued. I peeked at the photo, and sure enough, it was sister-in-law's husband, arm in arm with another woman. Sister-in-law's fury and sadness reached a peak, and she seemed to stop caring about me and Joseph. As soon as she got the picture forwarded from Joseph, she stormed off. The next day and the day after, when I asked Joseph, who didn't talk about sister-in-law, what happened to the couple, he said he didn't know because he had blocked sister-in-law's contact. I don't consider her a sibling anymore. All I want is to live a peaceful daily life with you. Fast forward a month. While out shopping with Joseph as usual, we bumped into a neighbor from where sister-in-law lives. Apparently, the sister-in-law couple was in the midst of divorce discussions, with the husband completely out of love with sister-in-law, and a reluctant sister-in-law still not wanting to split, despite the infidelity. As much as it sounds like a tough situation, I've decided to stop worrying about sister-in-law and just focus on living my own life. As long as I have Joseph, I have nothing to fear. Father-in-law always used to say, the key to happiness is to laugh a lot and sing out loud. I'm going to go back to my old job soon, but I plan on adhering to father-in-law's advice and enjoying life to the fullest, even for father-in-law's sake. Joseph and I both love to sing, and we've promised to participate in a karaoke competition together. Our goal? To make it to the same podium that father-in-law did, to reach the top, as we let our singing voices resonate towards the heavens.
What? Infertility treatment? We don't need that. All you need to do is take care of the house and family. What? That's unfair. I was taken aback by Lawrence's unexpected remark, feeling like I was just being treated as a housekeeper. Despite my anxiety, I carried on with my days. While cleaning Lawrence's room, I found something shocking. A birth video of a woman I didn't know. Who is this woman? As I was wondering what to do, a man named August appeared. I enlisted August's help to expose Lawrence's affair in front of our entire family. In the Keaton family, it's a tradition to gather at our parents' home on Christmas night. I made a suggestion to my in-laws. Lucas, could we host this year's Christmas gathering at our apartment? After explaining everything, my in-laws agreed. Thus began my revenge on Lawrence. I'm Maria, a 40-year-old housewife, married for 3 years. I married Lawrence at 37 and have been longing for a child. But even after 3 years, we still couldn't conceive. I met Lawrence, who is 3 years older than me, at a party, and we got married. The Keaton family, Lawrence's family, is a well-known, prestigious family in our area. It was somewhat surprising that Lawrence, the son of such a wealthy family, remained single until he was 40. However, we clicked, and I thought we were a good match, so I didn't hesitate to marry him. After our wedding, we started living in an apartment near his parents' house. Eventually, we planned to live with his parents, which seemed natural since I married their only son. Both of my in-laws cherish me as their daughter-in-law. Lucas could be a bit difficult, but my mother-in-law Diana was very kind. So I thought we would manage just fine. Following Lawrence's wishes, I quit my job to help out with family chores. I've always enjoyed helping others. I thought my dream of a happy married life was starting. But about a year into our marriage, I began to notice a change in Lawrence. He had been so kind when we first married. Recently, however, he seemed increasingly distant. When he came home from work, he wouldn't even say, "I'm home." He just handed me his shirt and said, "Wash this and iron it." We barely talked except when he had chores for me. I wondered, did I do something to upset him? Reflecting on my actions since our marriage, I couldn't find anything that would have angered Lawrence. Still concerned, I decided to talk to Diana about it. Diana, recently I feel like Lawrence has become colder. He hardly talks to me unless it's about chores. Am I doing something wrong? Diana smiled kindly and answered, "Lawrence is just like Lucas. After we got married, Lucas was the same way. Maybe Lawrence, like his father, finds it awkward to talk with his wife. So I shouldn't worry too much? Perhaps that's just the nature of marriage. Over time you'll come to understand each other better. Her words reassured me a little. Lucas and Diana have a very good relationship now, so I thought maybe Lawrence and I will get along better as time goes on. But I was still worried. Maybe if we had a child, Lawrence would change. I've always loved children and longed for my own. To that end, I checked my basal body temperature every morning and tracked the best days for conception. I also tried to lead a healthy lifestyle to improve my chances of getting pregnant. But 3 years into our marriage, there was still no sign of pregnancy. Maybe the problem was me. I decided to bring it up with Lawrence. Lawrence, we've been married for 3 years and still no children. I was thinking we should get checked. What do you mean, get checked? Lawrence asked with an indifferent expression. But I gathered my courage and continued. I mean, either you or I might have an issue. Maybe we should consider infertility treatment. I hesitantly brought up the topic of infertility treatment, but Lawrence just looked annoyed. Then he said something unbelievable. What? Infertility treatment? We don't need that. Just do your chores and take care of the family. What? That's harsh. I was shocked by Lawrence's unexpected response. I felt like he was treating me as nothing more than a housekeeper. Don't you want children? Even Lucas is expecting someone to continue the family name. I challenged him, but Lawrence seemed lost for words for a moment. That'll work itself out. What do you mean by work itself out? I questioned his vague response, but he didn't reply. The heir will work itself out. I couldn't stop thinking about what Lawrence had said, and the meaning behind those words would be revealed in an unexpected way later on. I spent each day burdened with anxiety. Day in and day out, cooking, laundry, cleaning. It was a never-ending cycle. I told myself it was natural since I was a daughter-in-law, but it felt increasingly empty. I was cleaning Lawrence's study again today. The room is lined with countless books. I have to carefully dust the spaces between them. Next to the bookshelf, there's a large CD rack. Due to the awkward gaps, I need to take everything out to clean it properly. I carefully removed each item, trying not to mix up their order. It seems the top shelf is filled with DVDs. While taking out about 20 at once, I lost my grip and dropped them all. Oh no! I need to put these back exactly as they were. All of the DVDs had fallen out of their cases, and I couldn't tell which belonged where. Lawrence is meticulous, so he labels both the DVDs and their cases. I started matching the labels on the DVDs to their cases. Among them, one caught my attention. I couldn't tell what it was about, but it read, November 30th, 2022, Clyde's birth. Clyde? Who's that? Seeing this reminded me of Lawrence's words. The heir will work itself out. Suspecting a connection, I decided to play the DVD. I took it to the living room where the TV and player were. Pressing play, the screen showed a dark room with a bed that looked like a hospital examination table. A woman in her early 20s lay on the bed, smiling at the camera. She wore oversized pajamas, and her belly was visibly large. She was pregnant. The woman calmly smiled, then suddenly grimaced in pain. It hurts, Lawrence, rub my back. Rosamond, just a little bit longer, you can do it. This must be labor. But more than that, I was startled by the voice of the man rubbing her back. Is that Lawrence's voice? The pregnant woman called him that too. She was in obvious pain. I've never experienced it, but it seemed like the baby was about to be born. So this was a labor room. Who is this woman? This woman in labor, continuously calling for Lawrence. Why was Lawrence there with her? After a while, several women in nurses' uniforms, presumably midwives, entered. They were guiding the pregnant woman in breathing techniques. The pregnant woman was then moved to the delivery table, and Lawrence followed her. It seemed the filming had paused for a while, and then, in the next moment, incredibly, the scene vividly displayed Lawrence attending the birth. Throughout her pain, the woman continued to call out Lawrence's name. Rosamond, it's okay. I can see the head. Just a little bit more. You're doing great. Lawrence's excited voice echoed. Tears started rolling down my cheeks. Lawrence was having an affair. The date on the label was exactly 1 year ago. This meant the affair had been going on for nearly 2 years. Was this DVD definitive proof? But this alone wasn't proof that the child was Lawrence's. In situations like this, I'd need a lawyer or a detective to investigate. However, Lawrence only gives me enough money for living expenses, so I don't have much to spare. As I was lost in thought, the doorbell rang. Looking out the window, I saw a man in his late 20s. "Hello, may I ask who you are?" "My name is August. Is Lawrence home?" He looked troubled. "No, my husband isn't home yet." "I see. You're his wife, aren't you? Sorry to bother you, but may I have a moment of your time?" I was curious about this troubled-looking man. Opening the front door, he politely handed me his business card. He introduced himself as August. The name sounded familiar. "Actually, I came to talk to your husband about a colleague of his, a woman named Rosamond." The name Rosamond caught my attention. It was the same as the pregnant woman from earlier. Is this Rosamond by any chance the woman who gave birth about a year ago? Upon hearing my question, August showed a look of surprise. "Why do you ask? Did your husband mention something about acknowledging a child?" "Acknowledging? What do you mean?" As I pressed for more answers in surprise, August covered his mouth with both hands, shocked. "I'm sorry," he said, clearly regretting his slip of the tongue. I calmed him down. "It's okay. I have an idea about what's going on, so please, won't you tell me everything?" I invited him inside to talk more comfortably. I served him coffee, but August didn't touch it, his expression grave. Then he murmured, "Rosamond is my ex-girlfriend." "What? So you broke up because she had an affair with my husband?" "No, it's not that, but—" I was confused by August's response. Normally, if a girlfriend cheats with her boss, the boyfriend would be angry and break up, or confront the man she cheated with. But August didn't seem to fit that pattern. "But isn't the child in Rosamond's womb Lawrence's? How could that not be the reason for your breakup?" "It's not like that! The child is actually mine!" August's sudden loud declaration startled me. More importantly, what did he mean the child wasn't Lawrence's? You mentioned Lawrence acknowledged the child, right? Does he know it's not his? "I don't know about that, but Rosamond insists it's Lawrence's child." "Do you have proof it's your child?" "Yes, I do," August asserted confidently. He had seen the baby, Clyde, and claimed the boy looked exactly like his own baby photos. That's why he tried to reconcile with Rosamond. However, Rosamond refused, not wanting a family with financially unstable August. No, it wasn't just that. Rosamond insisted that Clyde was not August's child, but definitely Lawrence's. That meant she had been involved with both men for a while. She got Lawrence to acknowledge the child, and he was even covering both child support and Rosamond's living expenses. Whenever I asked Lawrence about his salary, he would snap back, "Why do you need to know?" I see. He didn't want his salary known for that reason. I was filled with a sense of frustration and helplessness. August couldn't give up on the child and hired a detective. It turned out Clyde was indeed his son. "Mrs. Keaton, even if the child isn't your husband's, he was still having an affair, and we can't overlook him giving money to Rosamond." "Of course not." We decided to collaborate and resolve this matter. Now it's December. In the Keaton family, it's traditional to gather at the family home on Christmas night. I made a proposal to my in-laws. "Lucas, can we host this year's Christmas gathering at our house?"
"Why? You know our family is quite large,"
Lucas asked. "It's a lot of work preparing the meal and all." To get their cooperation, I knew I had to tell them the truth. I first shared with my in-laws the story I heard from August to prevent them from being too shocked. Then I decided to show them the DVD. Lucas, with his eyes wide open, watched and was at a loss for words.
"What is this?"
Diana was also greatly shocked to see Lawrence attending the birth of an unknown woman. I explained to my in-laws the plan I had devised with August and asked for their cooperation.
"All right. Not sure how it'll go, but let's help,"
Lucas agreed. "Yes, we need to confront Lawrence about this," Diana added. Their support was reassuring. All that was left was to wait for Christmas. And now, a month later, on Christmas night, the Keaton family relatives gathered at our house. We set up a long table in the living room and arranged the food. The relatives looked puzzled.
Why are we gathering here?
Before we started eating, Lucas stood up to address everyone.
Thank you for coming to the Keaton family's traditional gathering. It's a bit cramped, but there's something we need everyone to see. So we're here at the young couple's house. We don't have the equipment to play a DVD at our place.
After Lucas spoke, I also stood up. Before we eat, please watch this video. I turned on the TV and prepared to play the DVD.
What is it? Some fun video to show us?
Lawrence asked with a smile, looking at me, unaware of the fate that awaited him. As I pressed the play button, Lawrence's face froze in that instant. The screen showed Rosamond's face as she lay in the labor room.
Is this? Hey, stop it, Maria!
The relatives around us started murmuring in confusion.
What is this?
Who is this pregnant woman? Everyone's gaze turned to Lawrence, realizing the trouble he frantically searched for the remote control. But anticipating this, I had hidden it. When Lawrence realized there was no remote and approached the video player, Lucas stopped him.
Stop it! Let it play!
Desperately trying to stop the video, Lawrence struggled, but he was held back by Lucas and me.
Lawrence, give it up.
Just watch quietly. Told off by his own parents, Lawrence fell silent, tears welling up in his eyes. Meanwhile, the birth video continued to play.
This means Lawrence has a secret child.
Oh, to think someone in our Keaton family has a mistress. If people find out, we won't be able to show our faces around the neighborhood. Amidst the commotion with some relatives crying, I tried to calm everyone down. Please, everyone calm down. The baby born is not Lawrence's child. What? But Lawrence was clearly present at the birth, and the woman in labor kept calling out his name. Everyone looked at me with puzzled expressions, and among them, Lawrence seemed the most shocked.
Maria, how did you know that?
Oh, so you knew after all that the child isn't yours. I confronted him, and Lawrence clammed up, looking uncomfortable. If you knew it wasn't your child, why acknowledge it? And why have you been paying child support every month?
Well, that's because...
Lawrence, sweating, struggled to find the words.
Acknowledgement? Child support? And yet you say the child isn't Lawrence's. Explain yourself.
That's right. We can't accept this as it is. Everyone was demanding answers from Lawrence, but Lawrence couldn't bring himself to tell the truth. Unable to hold back any longer, Diana fell to her knees in front of everyone, crying.
I'm so sorry, everyone. It's my fault for not raising him properly.
As Diana sobbed, I patted her back to comfort her. No, Diana, this isn't your fault. I'm about to call someone who can testify to that.
You're right. Sorry for losing my composure.
With tears still in her eyes, Diana looked up. Sensing something was amiss, Lawrence confronted me.
What's going on here? What are you planning? Be quiet, Lawrence. This whole mess is your fault in the first place.
That's right. Even if the child isn't yours, the fact remains you had an affair. The room fell silent at my in-laws' words. It was about time for me to make the call. I took out my mobile phone and called someone. A few minutes later, the doorbell rang. It was August, who had been waiting nearby. Behind him was Rosamond, holding Clyde. As I let them into the living room, the relatives began to murmur.
Isn't that the pregnant woman from before?
Yes, it is, and this man, August, is the real father of the child. I introduced August to everyone. August had brought Rosamond, as planned. Our arrangement was this. August would go to Rosamond, tell her the family had found out about Lawrence's secret child, and lie that Lawrence was no longer able to pay child support and was passing custody to August. Rosamond, likely believing the ruse, must have panicked, so August played along.
It's hard for me to suddenly become a father, too.
He then invited her to the Keaton family home to discuss child support. Normally, a mistress wouldn't visit the family home, but Rosamond seemed desperate for money. She must have thought Lawrence would help her out. Knowing how Rosamond would likely react, August followed our plan. As expected, Rosamond exclaimed upon seeing Lawrence. What do you mean you're not paying child support anymore? And even transferring custody to this poor man? How cruel!
What? I haven't said anything like that. Ha ha ha! You were tricked, Rosamond.
What do you mean? Was it a lie?
Yes, and the story about Lawrence not paying child support and transferring custody to me was a lie. I had to say it to get you here.
That's terrible! You deceived me! But the fact that his wife found out is true. So you needed to be here to atone for your affair and deceitfully taking child support. Rosamond's face turned increasingly pale at my words. It's not a lie. Clyde is definitely Lawrence's child.
That's right. Clyde is my son, and I will make him the heir of this family.
Lawrence defended Rosamond. However, the relatives wouldn't stay silent.
What? You intended to make someone who isn't your biological child the heir?
Lucas yelled, and the others joined in with their complaints. Amid this, Lawrence boldly declared,
Maria can't have children. I'll divorce this useless wife and remarry Rosamond, who bore me a child, to continue the family name, even if it's not my biological child.
The room fell silent. Then Diana clung to Lawrence. How can you abandon Maria, who has served you dutifully as our daughter-in-law? That's too much, Lawrence.
It's necessary. Dad always wanted someone to continue the family name. No, I won't accept this. Don't you realize how much Maria wanted children? I knew she consulted you about it, and you treated her like just a housekeeper.
Lucas! Touched by Lucas defending me, I felt tears welling up.
Why would Dad know all this? Maria, did you tell him? Fool, we live nearby. Your voice carries to everyone. Just so you know, we won't accept someone to continue the family name under these circumstances.
August, overhearing, confronted Lawrence.
You keep talking about continuing the family name, but there's proof that Clyde isn't your child. Proof? I had a detective look into it. Remember when you were at the bar, having a good time talking to the woman sitting next to you? You were sweating a lot then, and she wiped your face with her handkerchief. Actually, that woman was a detective. When I visited Rosamond's place, I secretly borrowed Clyde's pacifier and had a paternity test done with it. What? Now you understand. You and Clyde are not related. By the way, I am his biological father. And you knew Clyde was AB blood type when you attended the birth. What's his blood type, Mrs. Keaton?
O type, so they can't be parent and child.
You hid that fact and claimed to be A type when acknowledging the child. Since Rosamond is B type, I'm A type.
With these revelations, Lawrence's voice broke down with emotion.
I had tests done. They showed a very low chance of me fathering a child.
I was shocked at this unexpected truth. Why didn't you tell me sooner? We could have sought treatment.
I was embarrassed, worried about what the neighbors would think, so I acknowledged Clyde.
That's no longer possible. Quietly transfer custody to August, Clyde's real father. No, stop this! Rosamond suddenly cried out, having been silent until then. I wanted to bear Lawrence's child and join the Keaton family, but not with this poor man.
What? Who are you calling poor?
That's right. August isn't poor at all. August and I said this, looking mockingly at Rosamond. What are you talking about? August works for a low salary at a small factory. Are you just pretending? Rosamond's loud voice made Clyde, whom she was holding, start crying. August quickly went over, took Clyde in his arms, and comforted him.
Poor thing. Don't cry because of your mother. There, good boy.
As August comforted Clyde, the boy stopped crying and smiled. Clyde knows who his dad is, even though they haven't lived together. And Rosamond, August isn't just pretending. I took over holding Clyde so August could explain.
I work at a subcontractor for my parents' company.
What do you mean?
Ever heard of Arrington Corporation?
At that, Rosamond's mouth fell open. The biggest local corporation, you mean?
That's right. My dad runs it. I'm learning the ropes at the subcontractor to eventually take over the family business.
Rosamond was shocked at this revelation. Then she suddenly smiled, pleased. Great! So Clyde's dad is going to be the president. Then I'll be the president's wife. Just as Rosamond said something so opportunistic, she forcefully snatched Clyde back from me. Holding him tightly, she declared, Clyde, we'll live together with your dad.
No, I'll take custody of Clyde, but I won't be with you. I'll raise him with my parents at home.
That seemed only natural to me, but Rosamond desperately resisted, turning pale. Why? There's a mother right here. Why this decision?
Of course, you lied and chased after men with money. How can I trust you?
Then I won't lie anymore. Please let me stay with Clyde. He needs me. Rosamond appealed to August with pleading eyes, but his resolve didn't waver. Clyde even looked away from her. Rosamond no longer had the right to be a mother.
Rosamond, you should be the first to apologize. Having an affair with a superior, and now you're here in front of his wife and relatives?
Rosamond was flustered in front of everyone. I seized the moment to say, regardless of who the child is, since you had an affair with Lawrence, you'll have to pay compensation in the divorce settlement. What? No way!
Stubborn woman, you need to take responsibility.
The relatives echoed with disapproval. And of course I'll also seek compensation from Lawrence for the divorce. Understood? I glared at Lawrence, speaking firmly. Then my in-laws also addressed Lawrence.
Not just that. Bringing such disgrace to the Keaton family, we can't apologize enough to the public. So, Lawrence, you must leave our home.
That's right. A disgrace to the Keaton family.
Exactly. Leave right now.
Faced with these demands from everyone, Lawrence shrank away. Lawrence, looking desperately at me, said,
Maria, I was wrong. I'll pay the compensation due from the divorce. Please help me.
I was speechless at this pitiful sight, but Lawrence, undeterred, continued.
If I'm thrown out, you'll struggle too, right? So ask Dad not to kick me out. If you ask, he'll listen.
No, that won't be necessary. I'm also leaving you and this place, I said firmly, feeling relieved. But Lawrence seemed unable to comprehend this situation, his expression dazed.
What are you talking about? How will you live as a housewife alone? You can't manage by yourself. No, that's fine.
August, interrupting, surprised Lawrence further.
Didn't you know, sir? Until just before her marriage, your wife was the executive secretary at our company. My dad still laments losing her. She was the best secretary we ever had. So after the divorce, she'll work for us again.
Indeed, I was the executive secretary at Arrington Corporation before my marriage. Lawrence, who never showed interest in my job, wouldn't have known. August and I hadn't met while I was there, so we didn't recognize each other initially. That's why, when I first met August, his name sounded familiar. That's why, Lawrence. Please, let's get divorced.
Though it's a pity to let go of such a good daughter-in-law like Maria, I'm familiar with the president of Arrington Corporation. We'll still keep in touch.
Yes, I too want to remain close with Maria. Lucas, Diana, thank you. I always want to continue our relationship. Tears in my eyes, I clasped hands with my in-laws. August took Clyde and left for home. Rosamond stayed behind for divorce compensation negotiations. The same for Lawrence. We couldn't just leave him without discussing compensation of asset division, which lasted until morning. We split the assets accumulated since our marriage, and I received additional compensation from Lawrence. Lawrence was then disowned by the Keaton family. Lawrence had never lived outside his family's property before. He even struggled with the arrangements for moving out. Moreover, the president of the company where Lawrence worked had connections with Lucas. As a result, the rumor that Lawrence had an affair with his subordinate Rosamond spread quickly. Naturally, his colleagues' treatment of him worsened. Rosamond resigned early and returned to her parents' house. However, her father, also acquainted with Lucas, was furious about her affair with her superior and recognition of a child by another man, and quickly kicked her out. Rosamond, having spent her divorce compensation, is now working at a bar. I heard this from Lucas, with whom I still keep in touch, and was again surprised by the extent of his network. Lawrence, troubled by his deteriorating relationships, eventually resigned. Where he went to seek work is unknown. Now I've been re-employed at Arrington Corporation, working as an executive secretary. August still works at the subcontractor's factory. He prefers to stay there for now. It allows him to rush to Clyde, who's not yet in kindergarten, if needed. Indeed, he's a great dad. While I once longed for children, my fulfilling job now makes me think marriage isn't necessary. However, about a year later, with Clyde enrolled in a childcare center, August moved to the parent company. Initially, he started as a trainee. One day, incredibly, August proposed to me. It was so unexpected that I was truly surprised. Really? There's over a 12-year age gap between us. Are you sure about this? When I asked this, August answered with a smile.
I decided this ever since you divorced. Clyde is fond of you, and most importantly, Dad says it has to be Maria. I know I'm just a greenhorn, but will you marry me?
Although I hesitated, I was drawn to August's earnestness. And so we got married. Now it's August, Clyde, and the new life growing inside me. A child with August. Together, we plan to build a happy family.